First and foremost, I'm going to apologize for my voice if it decides to give out on me. I've been casting the NACC all day. Didn't even get to watch the IEM games live. I did just finish up watching the VODs, however, which is why I'm sitting down to make this video. And this video is all about the World Elite versus GE upset. And the first thing, and kind of the overarching theme of this video, is no one could have predicted this. This doesn't put anything against any of the analysts, whether they said that it was possible, it wasn't possible, but everyone was saying it wasn't possible. No one could have predicted this. And I'm going to explain why no one could have predicted this. And the first place that I'm going to start is the history of World Elite. I'm not going to go super far back. I'm just going to talk about the history of World Elite and their current iteration of the roster this year. So, and as I say this, I'm going to say, and so last year in the LPL, World Elite failed to make the playoffs, and this led to the retirement of their kind of last two standing Royal Guard members, Wei Xiao and Cao Mei. Cao Mei, of course, he had a baby with his wife and chose to retire. Wei Xiao chooses to retire for, other reasons. There was kind of this idea that if World Elite had, not failed to make playoffs, which they barely just didn't by the skin of their teeth in a technicality against LGD, that maybe Wei Xiao would still be playing. That said, history goes as it went. And Wei Xiao decides to retire. So the only two carried over members from last year's World Elite roster to this year's WE roster are going to be Ninja, the mid laner from Korea, who is transferred that split, and Conan, the support player who replaced FCZF when he left for EDG. FCZF now also retired. Out of the two members to keep from that roster, those are easily the two worst performing members of the season, of that season staying on the roster. They are then joined and flanked by Aluka, former Positive Energy top laner, was on Name's team when Sika and Name carried Positive Energy to their LPL title, which is where Aluka got his title. Spirit of Samsung Blue. Ninja, the other Korean member, so Spirit Ninja, your two Koreans. STYZ, formerly of LGD, had a 6-month ban period, so this is his re-entrance into competitive play. And Conan is their initial support that they keep. STYZ was thought to be a very decent AD carry. He was actually hyped up to be very strong alongside SMLZ. Not necessarily to the strength of, Name, Deft, Imp, and Uzi, but definitely a top contender up there. I know that I've always compared him against the likes of Crystal. I think they're very, very similar. I think that STYZ's primary problem is his champion pool, but we'll get into that when I compare STYZ and Mystic and Xie and Ninja. So this World Elite roster, initially in probably the first few weeks, the first thing they do is they actually remove Conan, and they replace him with Yushe, who is the support player that played today. With this roster of Yushe, STYZ, Ninja, Spirit, and Aluka, World Elite lose 22 games, and they win 8. They've won 8 games. They have only won 1-0 because how the system works in China is it's sets of 2 and it's a point-based system. If you split a set, you get 1 point. If you 2-0 someone, you get 3 points. If you lose, obviously there's no points for losers. You don't win anything. They split against Vici Gaming. They split against Vici Gaming twice. So they haven't 2-0'd them, but the 2 times that they faced him, they've taken 1-1 each time. They split against Energy Pacemaker, bottom tier team. Starhorn Welcome, bottom tier team. This is before that they had Name. Gamty, bottom tier team. And then they've 2-0'd, their only 2-0 is against Invictus Gaming at the beginning of the season when Invictus Gaming wasn't performing, and Snake. So really the only 2 teams that are, decent caliber level teams that World Elite have split against are the Vici Gaming on the second rotation, because Vici have been slowly ramping up, and Snake. I don't even want to give them the IG game, but I mean, you could throw that in. So 3 teams. Out of 12 teams, World Elite have managed to unseat, 3 comparable teams. So now, they bring in the subs. Why did they bring in the subs? I hear that Ninja actually went to the management and was like, please sub me out. Like, please, just put me down. They sub in a guy named Xie and a guy named Mystic. Now, Xie is Chinese, Mystic is Korean. I don't know much about Mystic, so I'm not going to talk about his history, but I'll talk briefly about Xie's history. Now, Xie's competitive experience comes from World Elite Academy, and this is Xie's, title. World Elite Academy was considered to be one of the best teams in LPL. There was a lot of hype surrounding them a year ago when they had a victory in the G League, which is one of the off-season tournaments, and this was before EDG. So this is at the tournament they faced not Starhorn Royal Club, LMQ, and World Elite, and this was right before World Elite, ripped themselves apart because obviously they're having this internal drama, and EDG is about to be born. And I think that there was a sub, and I think that they also played Young Glory. Anyway, it's just kind of, they didn't go through any amazing teams. Royal Club had just lost half their roster. World Elite's having internal drama. LMQ, they're not super amazing, or they never were domestically. And Young Glory, I think, is the final. I think it was like a 2-1 split, and I think Shie, he always did decently in lane, although he did get dumpstered by Cool. Cool played as a sub in that G League. But it wasn't like a standout performance. So this is the big hype. They beat World Elite, as it now comes out, hindsight 2020. World Elite was having all these internal dramas. But at the time, people were like, oh my god, they beat World Elite. This World Elite Academy is better than World Elite. They're probably the best team in LPL. This is amazing. And all of this hype kind of rode with them into the upcoming split for LPL. They did lose their captain, their previous support player, Ari, for UJ. And everything falls apart. When Shie was on the team, they played 12 games, and they only won 1 game. And it was against Young Glory, who was also the bottom-tier LPL team. And then after that, they benched him, and they replaced him with a Korean named Mickey God, who had previously been jungling for them. So that is the extent of Shie's competitive LPL career. A G League title against teams that were splintering apart or brand new rosters. And losing, or out of 12 games in the LPL, only winning one of them against the worst, or the second worst team in LPL. That's it. Obviously, he has always been a standout solo queue player. Plays a lot of assassins. He is best well known for his Annie mid. He was known as playing Annie mid with a Magi Soul Stealer. I think he also debuted that in the LPL when he initially played for World Elite Academy. As an analyst, there's not a track record there to say that this guy is going to be able to perform in a competitive environment, especially not on a stage as important and as large as the IEM stage, especially not in a brand new roster against the likes of some of the best teams in the world, TSM, GE Tiger, CJ Indus, things like that. Gambit was on their winning spree, so there's no track record there. Let's talk about Mystic. Again, I said that I wasn't going to talk about Mystic's history because I don't know very well. I know that the few people that I've talked to who kind of follow the Korean scene and understand where Mystic came from have used the word mediocre. So let's compare him to STYZ, because I frankly don't think that STYZ is actually mediocre. I think he's fairly good, which is why initially when I was told that the roster swap, I was like, what? Why would you roster swap right now? Because to my scope and how I'm looking at it, in the LPL most recently, World Elite have actually looked far better than they have previously in the leading weeks. I mean, it was just awful. But suddenly now Ninja, the mid laner, the Korean mid laner, who has frankly I've always criticized and been a very harsh critic of, is really performing and turning out, specifically on picks like Ezreal. He's always been kind of like a back mage player, but he just goes off in some of these Ezreal games. I'm like, okay, so World Elite are looking probably the strongest that they've ever looked in LPL. Has it necessarily translated into results? Sometimes. Not enough, but it's not like World Elite's getting better and all the other LPL teams are staying stagnant. All of these hybrid rosters are getting better together, and unfortunately World Elite just doesn't have enough tools. They have a very large, glaring weakness on the roster in the form of a Luca. He is by far the worst top laner in LPL, or at least the weakest top laner in LPL. That's the frank, honest way to put that. And people have said, oh, you're being too harsh on him, you're underselling him, he had a, great, fantastic performance in the GE set. Aluka had a good performance in the GE set. He had a couple of nice sign ults. I think he hit two really good sign ults. He had 2 good Hecarim ults. I definitely think it's probably one of the best times that he's played in a tournament, but it does not make up. It baffles me how people make those comments to me. It's like, did you not see the game against TSM just yesterday? That was pretty indicative of Aluka's LPL career in that game. So I don't know how you can have the TSM game and completely ignore that and be like, no, this GE game, you're underselling him. I see through you, Frosker, and this guy's actually really good. I think someone made the comment, you're underselling him to make China seem better than it is. Or something. I was like, what? That is such twisted logic. No, Aluka has always been the glaring weakness in World Elite during the LPL. Limited champion pool, you have to put him on very easy to play kind of super tanks. He can't play that really mechanical oriented, you can't put him on a champion as important as Gnar. He's not good at managing the rage bar or anything like that. Rumble, never gonna see it. It's always gonna be just very straightforward, linear playing super tanks. Sion, Maokai, he's had a few Rumble games which have gone awful. I think he's negative in every single champion win rate, except for Kennen, because he's never played it. That's statistically Aluka's performance throughout the LPL. Of course, his team loses every game. Mystic versus STYZ. STYZ has been a problem for World Elite. Just to be frank, I don't necessarily think he's a bad player. I think that there are glaring issues mechanically with Aluka, but STYZ, it's a champion pool issue. He simply cannot perform and he cannot play on the champions that are very meta right now. And if you look at the GE series specifically, Mystic won on 2 champions. He won on Ezreal and he won on Severe. Severe was a huge pick, not only globally, but specifically and especially for China, because they are a very team-fight-oriented region, especially early on, and STYZ could not perform in that champion. Historically, he's a Caitlyn player, so he's not an AD caster like Grave, Severe, and Corki, Lucian, who are doing their damage, with their abilities and kind of weaving that through Ezreal. He's an auto-attack, right-click base AD carry, Caitlyn. That's his big champion. And so I think that the meta really hurt STYZ and his ability to shine. He did have a good reputation formerly of LGD, was banned for 6 months because he tried to break contract, but people did respect STYZ, and unfortunately he just has not been able to show up. So the fact that Mystic is his replacement and then finds success on the champions that are in meta that STYZ is unable to play, I think is pretty telling, and is definitely an immediate upgrade. If in the long run, Mystic is still able to perform as the meta, maybe, might shift out of this caster-style AD carry into, if the meta ever swings back towards champions like Caitlyn, maybe, but right now, yeah, Mystic can play what needs to be played, and he did a good job on it. Xie versus Ninja. Again, what is very peculiar to me is the fact that Ninja was playing so well leading up to IEM, and Xie did not have a track record that you could look back on and say that this is going to be an immediate upgrade. The only thing that he had going for him is the #1 spot on the Ionian server. That's it. And if that's enough for people to suddenly be asking, oh my god, Xie, how did you not see this coming? Like, that's not enough from an analyst point of view. There has never been any correlation that excelling in solo queue is going to translate necessarily to excelling in ranked fights. I mean, obviously I think the most obvious name that people will throw around in response to that is, oh, what about Wild Turtle? He's got like 50 million accounts in Challenger. Like, yeah, but there's all those other people in Challenger that have yet to really find a team. So if we want to play the statistic game on that. So let's now talk about what I think actually happened in the GE versus World Elite game, and it really comes down to 2 really basic principles. And I kind of came to this realization when I was talking to Thorn on the last incoming aggression. He was talking about kind of the difference between how an analyst thinks and how an analyst views the game, and how maybe a team views the game. And I've heard this many times because I've worked in the background with teams. A lot of teams, and it's not saying that they don't prep for teams, but there is definitely more of an emphasis on securing your own strengths and securing your own power and your own champions and your own strategy versus denying someone else their strategy. As far as picks, primarily as far as picks. And that's fairly interesting to me. And it seems so obvious now that I can reflect on it, but as an analyst, like, obviously, yeah, when you look as a team, I'm like, okay, you just take away, like, let's take Snake, for example. If you take away Jarvan, Nunu, that team can't do anything. And it's been proven. Masters 3 did just that, and they 2-0'd Snake. Just out of the blue. Of course, Snake have now started to mix up their compositions against EDG, and they've pulled out a Juggernaut composition, but, initially, like, that's how you look at it as an analyst. So when I look at World Elite, I look at what they've been successful on. which their primary carry of the team is going to be Spirit. He is probably the only Korean, no, I'll say Deft. Deft and Spirit have been the only two Korean players that since their departure from Korea and being in China have actually gotten better. The Spirit is the best jungler in LPL. Just flat out he is. If that makes him the best jungler in the world, I have no idea. But he is definitely the best jungler in LPL. Spirit is the hard carry of World Elite. Not that he can only play these champions, just this is what his team needs him to play for him to succeed. Rek'Sai, Jarvan, and Nidalee. Those have been the three champions that he's had the most impact positively for his team. And the reason is this: mobility and pressure. All of these champions are highly mobile. All of them are incredibly powerful within the current meta, especially Rek'Sai, especially Nidalee. And if you give him these champions, he can hard carry a game. Typically, he doesn't get them, though. The thing with Jarvan, he's still highly mobile. Jarvan is prioritized very much in LPL. And it really comes down to the utility and the team fight potential of Jarvan to kind of separate and isolate targets to really help the fact that World Elite is a clusterfuck when it comes to team fighting correctly, making sure, and this was so obvious, even in the GE, like the second GE Tigers game, maybe it was the last one, where, no, I think it was the second one. No, he had Rek'Sai. It was the third one. They were fighting over a dragon, and World Elite had like a 7k gold lead, and GE Tigers almost won the 5v5. I think it was a 2 for, it was a 3-for-5 exchange where only Xie and Spear were the last two members standing, and then they went and took the dragon. Just look at how awful that team fight is. That if they, even with a gold lead, GE almost won that. I think Monty actually makes the comment on it as well, and that's just what I'm talking about. Like, they need champions that can either really excel in the team fight and make up for their deficiencies as a unit working together, or they need incredibly mobile champions that can be everywhere because they need to apply pressure to everything all at once. And Rek'Sai and Nidalee are the only two jungle champions that can really do that efficiently. So first and foremost, as an analyst, that's what I point at. Okay, Spirit's the best player. What do? You take away those champions. If that means ban, if that means picking away, you do not let him have Rek'Sai, Jarvan, or Nidalee. Now, let's look at the GE Tigers game. The game that they lose is the first game. What does Spirit play? Plays Lee Sin. The two games that they win, Jarvan and Rek'Sai. So first and foremost, that's what I'm pointing at. How could you let him have those champions? Now, the counter argument to this is that in the TSM versus World League game, they let him have Jarvan. But the thing is that TSM, and I just watching them, I think they did a great job. Of course, not in the backstage, don't know this for sure, but just as a bystander looking at this game, I think they did a great job of scouting their opponent. They, Bjergsen knew that they were, what did he say in the interview? I think he said that they knew that they were going to, or surprised that they took the Jarvan, especially because the nerfs went through, but it didn't bother them, so they took away the other two strong junglers. They took away Nidalee and Rek'Sai. He takes the Jarvan, and then they make a point to deep ward Spirit's jungle. They always know where Spirit is, and they move around him, and they just out-rotate and out-maneuver Spirit to just crush World Elite. That never happened in the GE Tigers game. There were never the oppressive deep wards on Spirit from GE that TSM was able to get. So those were the two big differences for me. Is the champion pool was not limited by Spirit. You cannot give the best jungler in the world the best jungler in the world. Like, Rek'Sai is too powerful. How could you give Spirit Rek'Sai? Just in good conscience, especially in the third game. That's the most important game. Typically, when teams are playing a best of 3 and you're in the last game, that game should go late because neither team wants to risk an early cheese or a snowball to lose like that. So typically, teams play fairly cautious when they're in the last game of a set like that. Just bizarre to me. And the other fact that they never applied deep ward pressure on Spirit and made it a point to really follow him and make sure that they knew exactly where he was at all times. Those two facts alone, I mean, Aluka, yeah, it had a fine performance, showed that he has depth to his champion pool, depth of, Sion, Maokai, and Hecarim. The other big thing, what I found really curious, is that World Elite never lane swapped. Which should make obvious sense because performing a lane swap like that, you need to have good coordination and good communication and have it practiced. This is a brand new roster. There is a language barrier. There are synergy issues, although Xie Yuxie are old teammates, as well as Mystic and Xie are teammates from kind of previous tournaments over the course of their Chinese careers. But even in the lane swap that GE did, World Elite still got the traditional standard 2v2 in the bottom of the support and the AD carry. There was never a time where they put, the AD carry, Mystic up in the top lane to farm by himself. So I think kind of these factors were the big tales of how this was even possible in the first place. Outside that, they played a relatively standard, Kelsey used the word solo QS. I don't know if I entirely agree with that. I understand what she means and the fact that it's more skirmish based. Anytime that they did take a big 5v5 engagement like that dragon fight, it didn't pan out because there simply wasn't the coordination there. Aluka did have some, I think he had 2 really good teleports, 2 good Scion ults, and then he had 2 good Hecarim ults throughout the entire series. So probably the best performance of Aluka's life on that tournament stage. That said, imagine how much better he actually looks when he's not being consistently dove or pressured up in that top lane. So lack of pressure on Aluka when he's clearly the weakest point, lack of denial against Spirit as well as tracking on Spirit when he's clearly the strongest point, and lack of forcing World Elite to forcing them outside of their comfort zone to play more 5v5s, to group earlier, to force them to make strategic decisions, to be a more strategy-oriented team as opposed to just giving them a standard game every time, I think were the 3 primary factors of what really led to this massive upset. But again, going back to the whole point of it, no one could have predicted this. There was no track record to say that Xie was going to be as potent as he was in that 1v1. Although he has always been strong in his laning phase, most Chinese mids are. Most Chinese players are. I mean, the thing about China is that its player base is so massive. The Ionian server crashes when you use the spectate feature because there are so many players on it. And it's one of 20 servers in all of China. Obviously, it's the most competitive, but the sheer raw number of talent and the mechanical ability. I know that when I had Chaox and Nori over in China and they were on solo queue, all of the players from Roar said that the Chinese solo queue was harder than the North American solo queue. I'm not trying to make a big debate, that Chinese players are better than North American players, but when you have more players, you have to think of like the number of really talented mechanical players is just that much larger, just because there's just a sheer volume there. Other than that, I don't think there's much more I can say on the topic. Closing notes. I am a merciful God. I didn't predict that World Elite was going to win. I said that World Elite was going to get crushed, which they did get crushed in the TSM game. That's pretty much what I expected. No one could have predicted this. If anyone said that they did predict this, they're lying. They're lying through their teeth. That said, if this was Coast versus EDG, and Coast beat EDG in a best of 3, I would never hear the end of it. That would literally, it would just be the biggest circle jerk till the end of time. But I'm just gonna say, I'm being respectful. I understand. I think it's an upset. I am a merciful God. That said, if World Elite beat TSM tomorrow, I don't think they will. They shouldn't. I think TSM already has proven that they have the perfect roadmap to answer to World Elite. And World Elite are then responsible for taking out CJ Entus, GE Tigers, and TSM. Prepare yourselves, because the filter will come off, and I will not take the high road that day. So that's the one closing statement I'll make. Just everyone reflect on themselves. If it was Coast versus EDG, what would my Twitter feed look like right now? I'll leave you on that.